You know what's been killing me about this whole situation? We just watched the Toronto Blue Jays get within one game of ending their championship drought. Watch them battle through an entire season with that hunger we haven't seen in years. Watch Vladimir Guerrero Jr. launch a home run off Blake Snell in the World Series that made every single person in Rogers Center believe this was finally happening. And then it all fell apart in extra innings of Game 7. The Dodgers won, the trophy went to Los Angeles, and we're left sitting here trying to process what just happened while simultaneously dealing with the immediate reality that this team needs serious pitching help if they ever want to get back to that stage. Let me be real with you for a second. That Game 7 loss wasn't just another playoff disappointment. This was different. This was Toronto fighting their way through a gauntlet. What stealing games they had no business winning, showing a resilience that made even the doubters start to believe. And when they got to the World Series against a Dodgers team that looked like it was assembled specifically to win this exact down, they made it a fight. They made it dramatic. They made it come down to the absolute final moments before it slipped away. The Blake Snell storyline is where things got really complicated. Here is a guy who'd been absolutely dominant throughout the playoffs, posting a ridiculous .86 ERA across 3 games, looking like the ace the Dodgers paid $182 million to acquire. Then the World Series started, and something shifted. Game 5 happens, 3 pitches, 2 home runs, and one of them comes off Vladdy's bat. That moment right there, that swing. That was Toronto refusing to go quietly. That was a statement that they belonged on that stage. What happened after the series, though? That's what nobody expected. Snell jumped on social media, responding to fans, making jokes about Guerrero being in Cancun, then trying to walk it back, asking people not to clip his quotes out of context, eventually praising Vlad's performance. The whole thing showed how the pressure of that moment affected everyone, even the guys who won the championship. And you have to wonder what was going through his head. Was it genuine banter? Was it frustration leaking out? Was it the weight of knowing he didn't perform when it mattered most finally breaking through? For Blue Jays fans, watching that whole exchange unfold was this weird mix of emotions. Pride, because Guerrero showed the world what he's capable of on the biggest stage possible. Frustration, because that moment of brilliance still wasn't enough to bring home the trophy. And this lingering question of what if one more thing had gone right? What if one more decision had been different? What if the roster had one more piece that could have made the difference? That's where we are right now, stuck between processing the pain of what just happened and immediately having to focus on what comes next, because the front office doesn't have the luxury of sitting around feeling sorry about Game 7. The roster needs work. The rotation especially needs serious reinforcement, and the clock is already ticking on next season. The qualifying offer situation added another layer of complexity, with Bo Bichette turning down his offer sets off all these strategic implications for how Toronto approaches their roster construction. Meanwhile, Brandon Woodruff accepting his qualifying offer in Milwaukee completely reshuffles the trade market. And suddenly, out of nowhere, here is this possibility that seemed impossible might actually be available. When Keegan Matheson from MLB.com essentially called Peralta the dream acquisition for Toronto, calling him the most attractive pitcher realistically available via trade, that got everyone's attention. This isn't some mid-tier arm. They're talking about adding for depth. This is a legitimate ace coming off the best season of his career. 17 wins, 204 strikeouts, a 1.08 WHIP, a 2.90 ARA. Those aren't just good numbers. Those are elite numbers from a guy who's still young enough to be part of a long-term solution. The problem is Toronto isn't the only team that sees it. The Brewers president didn't sound thrilled about trading Peralta, but he didn't completely shut the door either. And with Woodruff staying in Milwaukee, the financial flexibility exists to move a controllable pitcher like Peralta. If the return is right, that's created this feeding frenzy where half the league is circling. The Red Sox want him, the Orioles want him, the Mets, Angels, Astros, Giants, Padres, Tigers. Everyone sees what Toronto sees, a cost-controlled ace who can change the entire identity of a rotation. Here's what makes this moment so critical for the Blue Jays. They just proved they can compete at the highest level. They got a Game 7 of the World Series. They showed they have star power in Guerrero and Bichette. They have a core that's good enough to win if the pieces around them are right. But they also exposed the gaps. The rotation depth isn't there. The consistency from the back end isn't there. And if they go into next season without addressing those issues, they're basically admitting that getting to Game 7 was the ceiling goal. Adding someone like Peralta would be more than just improving the roster. It would be a statement. It would be the front office saying, we're not satisfied with almost, we want to finish what we started. It would give the fan base something to believe in after the most painful loss imaginable. It would show that Toronto learned from this experience instead of just accepting it and moving on. But here is the reality. Check. Trade negotiations for a pitcher of Peralta's caliber are brutal. Milwaukee isn't going to give him away. They did it with Corbin Burnes, trading him when his value was at its peak. And they'll probably take the same approach here. They're going to want premium prospects. They're going to want multiple pieces. And Toronto is going to have to decide if they're willing to pay that price, if they're willing to deplete their farm system for a guy who could be the difference between competing and winning. The fans feel all of this. Every notification that pops up could be the one that changes everything. Every rumor that surfaces gets dissected and analyzed and debated endlessly. Because this isn't just about adding a pitcher, this is about whether Toronto has the guts to go all in after coming so close. This is about whether management believes this core can actually win a championship. Or if they think the window is already closing, what makes it even harder is the timing. We're still processing the World Series loss. The emotional wound is fresh. Vladdy's home run is still playing on loop in everyone's minds. The extra inning heartbreak is still raw, and instead of getting time to heal, we're immediately thrust into this high-stakes chess match where one wrong move could waste the entire opportunity. The contrast between where Toronto was 2 weeks ago and where they are now is staggering. 2 weeks ago, they were one game away from a championship. Now they're scrambling to fill holes and praying they can land a trade that might not even be available. That's the brutal reality of professional sports. T here is no time to feel sorry for yourself. You either adapt and improve or you fall behind. What this whole situation reveals is something deeper about what it means to be a Blue Jays fan. We've been through cycles like this before, seasons where we got close but not close enough, off seasons where we waited for the big move that never came, years of hope followed by disappointment, followed by rebuilding, followed by hope again. It's exhausting, but we keep showing up. We keep believing. Because that's what you do. When you love a team, pinging in Freddie Peralta right now would mean more than just adding wins to the rotation. It would be proof that the front office understands the urgency of this moment. It would show they're not content with moral victories or participation trophies. It would demonstrate that getting to Game 7 wasn't enough, that Toronto wants to be remembered as champions, not as the team that almost made it. The pressure is massive, the competition is fierce, the cost will be high. But after what we just went through, after watching Guerrero battle Snell on the biggest stage in baseball, after